Well, good evening, everybody. I am delighted to introduce this Ask Andy event. It is the first one, I believe, we hold here in Dudley, and particularly as the Dudley North Member of Parliament. I am joined by, obviously, Andy Street, Mayor of the Combined Authority, covering the whole of the West Midlands. So it's great to have you here in Dudley, virtually, Andy. And I'm also joined by Council Leader Patrick Harley. I'm just going to go through some housekeeping points to begin with. So the event is going to last an hour. The event is in fact going to be recorded. So whilst we are not actually transmitting this live, there are aspects of this event which we may choose to use for clips for social media purposes afterwards. And any messages that we receive, either live or that have been pre-submitted, that we feel are best answered in writing, we shall do so. Obviously, we want to get as many questions as we can as possible, and we are literally able to ask Andy and Patrick, really, any questions we want. So it's a great pleasure. Andy, welcome. Patrick, welcome to this.
Thank you very much, Marco. Looking forward to it. And I'm sorry, of course, we have to do it all virtually. Had it been normal times, we'd all have come together, as we did in a number of Ask Andys actually across the Dudley patch before the pandemic. But I was very determined that we sort of defeated the restrictions and found a way that I could be held accountable to your residents. So looking forward to it, Marco.
Fantastic. So I already have a list of 4 questions. I think I shall ask the first, and Patrick, if you could ask the second and third, and then I'll ask the fourth, which are sort of wide-ranging questions that encapsulate already a number of points that have been asked by a number of people. So, Andy, it is, of course, imperative that we protect as much of our precious green belt as we can. And here in Dudley, we have a significant amount of green belt, particularly adjoining the boundary to Dudley. Therefore, it's located in South Staffs. You know, what have you been doing? And I know we've obviously been campaigning together in this, but what have you in particular been doing to protect our green belt, Andy?
I think, Marco, the flippant answer would be, I've been standing in too many cold, wet fields on Saturday morning with you, making the case to prevent greenbelt development. But let's just be clear, because your MP has been absolutely determined over this since he was elected and has really enlisted my support for a number of campaigns. But let's give a more full answer than that, of course. So first thing to say is I'm not against development, not against housing. We have to provide housing, but it's a question of it being in the right place. And the good news is, in the last 2 years, we've actually built a record number of homes in the West Midlands, nearly 17,000 a year, double what it was 5 years ago. But they have nearly all been built on brownfield land. And I've given an absolutely categoric assurance alongside the council that we will defend Greenbelt around the edge of Dudley. So whether it be in Halesowen in the south, around the south side of Stourbridge, or whether it be up through Kings Winford, or indeed in your patch through Gornal and Sedgley, absolutely critical commitment that we will defend the green belt that adjoins the built up area at the moment. And there's really 2 very simple reasons for this. Number one, it's an environmental lung. It's the best feature, and once it's gone, it's gone. We all talk about, you know, a sustainability, carbon neutrality. It would just be folly to build on that green belt. But secondarily, it is much better to build on brownfield land because that brings communities back to life. For literally decades in the Black Country, people have looked at derelict industrial sites for outside their windows. What we're now doing is bringing them back to life. And it's not in Dudley, but the best example of all, of course, is Phoenix 10, a huge site there by the motorway, right in the heart of the conurbation. And you just think to yourself, how on earth has that been left derelict for 30 years? But we're actually bringing it back, planning permission now with Walsall Council, and it will be coming back to life very shortly.
Fantastic. I know that well, of course. Patrick, you're going to come in with the second question, but I was just wondering, from the council's perspective, do you have any comments to make in relation to Greenbelt, and particularly sort of the boundary area to Walsall, where we can see South Staffordshire looking at tentative applications for doing what they would call urban extension?
Indeed, Mark, I'd just like to echo Andy's line of thought there, that as a council, as an administration, we operate a brownfield first policy, and it will be greenbelt at the very, very last resort. And I've seen nothing in the reports that I've seen and in the evidence that I've seen, and the same evidence that Andy will see in yourself, that we need to encroach on our greenbelt within Dudley. Now, that won't be the same everywhere across the country, but certainly in Dudley, I've seen no reason why we should have to do that. So from the council's perspective, it's brownfield first, second and third as far as we're concerned.
Perhaps, Marco, as this is such an important question, I can just add one other thing, because behind what Pat and I have said is real substance in terms of getting money from central government. So what we've actually done is we've got about £450 million now, which is an enormous amount of money, specifically to clean up derelict industrial sites so that they can be redeveloped. And as I know you and Pat know very well, it was actually that money that helped us deal with Cavendish House in the middle of the town centre. Obviously, that's not just a housing development, that's a commercial development as well. But the same idea, we won cash from government and we're able to use it to clean up those industrial estates.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you, Patrick, for your contribution to that question. Would you like to ask Andy the second question around infrastructure, please?
Yes, I would, and I'll just add on from Andy's point on Cavendish House. For so many years that lay empty, casting a shadow across Dudley Town Centre, and thanks to Andy's involvement, that building is no longer there, and it paves the way to almost 1,000 people having residential status in the town centre in the years to come. A clear example of brownfield policy, first and foremost. Andy, infrastructure across the region is hugely important, and it's critical. And critical to that is its key transport links. So what actions have you taken as regards to the Black Country Metro extension?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the question, Pat. I mean, I think the mayor's job is described as many things, but above all else, it is about winning the funding for these transport and infrastructure things. Perhaps just to make people reflect on this, if you think of Ken Livingstone, first mayor of London, completely different politics to me, but he did establish the job around transport and infrastructure. So I think this is mission critical to the job of the mayor. And I would say to you that people had talked about the Black Country Metro link for 30 years ago. People were always talking about it and nothing had happened. And so I hope people would say, I managed to make this happen within the first few months of being mayor. So the story goes that very shortly after becoming mayor, I got the business case together from Transport for the West Midlands. We needed a lot of government funding for it. So I did literally go and sit in Philip Hammond's office as the Chancellor and rather politely say, Philip, I'm not going till I get my way. That might have seemed rather an odd negotiating tactic, but it was basically that. And we did win £210 million of government funding for that metro. We were able to add to it with some local money, and it was on the basis of that that the Combined Authority Board gave the unanimous commitment to build the line, and it remains the single biggest investment that we have made. And actually what's so brilliant is that now the diggers are in the ground with it's actually been built. You can see the effect it has had on investment in Dudley Town Centre. So whether it be going along the route of the metro, the Institute of Technology building, the Very Light Rail building, the plans on Castle Hill, whether it be up to Portersfield, whether it be the leisure centre, whether it be the bus interchange, all of those things have come on the back of the metro. So it's very much the sort of catalyst for everything else. So when I look back, I do think actually we've done a decent job to win that investment for Dudley and to catalyse so many other things.
Can I add to, well, come in and make some observations and perhaps ask a supplementary here, Patrick? As politicians, we can often fall into a bit of a trap, which is we talk about numbers and we talk about big projects. What I think is really important is that we actually translate that into what does that actually mean in terms of outcomes for local people. And this really fits in with the agenda for what Boris talks about in terms of levelling up, which is about creating opportunities. So what these big capital infrastructure projects do, I'm sure you'd agree with me here, Andy, is actually open up opportunities for a lot of people. Wouldn't you agree?
I do agree. That's the whole point of it. So, I mean, it's a harsh thing to admit, but Dudley's been separated from the country's main transport infrastructure for 50, 60 years. That wasn't right. So people in Dudley, if they wanted to go and get a job a little further away, it was hard to get to it. Or put the other way, it was hard to draw customers into the centre of Dudley. So what this is going to do is allow people to move both ways for jobs, for leisure, for training. So hence, for example, why that whole idea of the Institute of Technology College being there, really, really easily accessible, can draw its catchment out and really provide those opportunities, Marco. So yeah, it's exactly what it's about.
Fantastic. Back over to you, Pat.
Yeah, cheers, Marco. Andy, following on from your comments about the Black Country Metro extension, can you tell us what you think the new Dudley Interchange project will mean for the people of Dudley?
Yeah, with pleasure. So Dudley Interchange, just to explain for those on the line who might not know exactly what we're referring to there, we've got a beautiful, if slightly dated, bus station in Dudley. And this will be a replacement for that. And it's a genuine interchange between the Metro bus station. Of course, we'll have the cycle hire scheme at it. Hopefully in time, it'll have the scooters. So all of the transport comes together there, including, of course, some of the upgraded bus routes that we're just building through as well. So all congregates there right on the doorstep of the town centre. So this is about really easy public transport to get to the town centre, which of course should bring more people into the town centre, driving the economy there. And it's also very clean as well. But one last thought, and this is really proves the point about it being a catalyst again. It's been designed to actually change the land take with the scheme that will become known as Portersfield. So the redesign of that enables that huge private sector development to go ahead as well. So it's a great example of really sort of joined up thinking and planning there.
Excellent. So what we're actually doing there is also bringing private money as well as public money into the equation, aren't we, Andy?
That's been one of the features of all this infrastructure. There's some public money. It has to sort of prime it, you might say, but there is actually more private money coming on top of it. That's absolutely right. And we've also tried to think about sort of thinking outside the box in terms of how we fund the balance of the Metro beyond the public money. We're actually using borrowing against future income. That's not been done before. It's original thinking. So yeah, we're trying to bring a bit of commercial experience to how we can make all these things happen. And I don't know if it's going to come up later, so I'm going to sort of spare Pat's blushes now. When you add up the value of all of those investments in the centre of Dudley, Pat often says it's over £1 billion. And if I'm very honest, I'm very proud as mayor to have played a role in enabling that for Dudley, because there was absolutely no reason why Dudley shouldn't have won that type of investment before. But the fact is it hadn't, and it's needed this joined up thinking between the public and the private sector to get that level of investment going. And it's lovely to see one or two of the chat comments already coming up on the screen saying things are looking up in Dudley now. So whoever's put that, thank you very much.
Excellent. So I think the final general question is back to me. And you've mentioned obviously the economy, Andy, and we all know, every single person will know that clearly the economy has been struggling as a result of the pandemic, the global pandemic. So what actions on a regional level have you been involved in so that we can make sure that the investment is going to be coming in, so that we can take action on jobs, so that the recovery that we see is what they say is V-shaped, so we get a bounce back
Yeah.
as sharp as we can make it, and as aggressive as we can make it, and sustainably, clearly.
Okay, so I'm going to start in what you might think is an odd place, but I think actually this is something that's very important for the mayor to do. And I'm going to talk about the support for hospitality, actually. So we know that's a sector that's been incredibly badly hit here. And of course, the most important thing about the recovery is you keep what you've got and enables that to bounce back. We'll come to new businesses in just a bit, but the keeping what you've got is so important. So even last autumn, when we were just going into the restrictions, I was the one who was saying government support for this industry is not good enough. And some of your people on the line tonight might have seen me on the main Midlands Today, national news, shouting up for hospitality. And it was brilliant that Rishi Sunak then said in the floor of the House of Commons, Andy Street's been vocal about this. I'm changing what I'm doing. I'm putting more money on the table. And the reason I say that's important for the mayor is on occasions you have got to shout up against your own party and you've got to actually stand up for the region and its interests. So that's what I did. But then you're probably pushing, Marco, not for that, but for things about new industries. So much as we've got to protect protect what we've got, we've also got to think about new industries, and probably just three to call out here. We've got a huge success at the moment in our digital industries. And what we're trying to do, we're using regional money to get people trained. Maybe they've fallen out of another job, retrained into those industries. So running what we call our digital boot camps, brilliant success getting people into jobs there. Then there's the whole sort of construction sector. We spent time just talking about the investments that we're making. That too is going to be an incredible success of the future. We're also running our big training programs there, as we call training hubs. And actually at Dudley College was a brilliant example of where we've set one of those up. And then, of course, I just give you, it's not in Dudley, this one, but I think it's a brilliant example of what we tried to do. Think about new technology, the health and social care sector, life sciences, over 200 million come into Birmingham for a life sciences campus of private money based on what's been going on in the university. And it's an incredible investment, should give us real confidence for the future. So lots of different sectors that we're trying to bid. And if I can give one last Dudley example here, the Very Light Rail Centre, again, just in the just underneath Castle Hill. Pat's been brilliant lobbying for this. We supported this, and that is new technology driving new high quality jobs in Dudley, and we're going to see those vehicles that'll be tested in Dudley used on the streets of Coventry. So it's a lovely made in the West Midlands idea for rebounding our economy.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for the typically frank and detailed answers that you've given to everything you ask. Now, there's a question that's come in, and Patrick, I think you've probably seen it as well, from Jay Singh Sohal, which is very topical. You and I were on Black Country Radio the other day about this. Would you like to ask it, Pat, or shall I? I'm quite easy on that. In regards to the police station.
If you want to ask it, yeah, because I could probably comment once the question has been asked.
Okay, so I'll ask the question, Andy, and because actually Pat is part of the answer in some respects. So as you probably know, Jay and I, we're campaigning to stop police station closures, although sadly it's too late for Sedgley. With regards to Dudley, the current Police and Crime Commissioner has yet to move forward in a meaningful way on the new station that was proposed best part of 2 years ago. In fact, my predecessor, Andy, was photographed on the site saying promise made, promise delivered, but it's still a very desolate site. And uncharacteristically, I think it needs the likes of you, me, and Patrick to actually unblock the blocking. So that's what we're working on. So what do you think? What can you contribute in terms of making this happen, Andy? And I'm just wondering whether perhaps Pat should come in first, and then perhaps, Andy, you could add to that.
Yeah, with pleasure. You've heard enough of my voice so far.
Yeah. Very quickly, Marco and Andy. I think the reason for the delay is clearly with West Midlands Police. We had an opportunity to clear this up once and for all last week on Black Country Radio, where they invited myself, David Jamieson, the Police and Crime Commissioner, plus Marco Longhi as the Dudley North MP, and myself as leader, and the three of us could have got to the bottom of why there have been 2 years and no progress on the building of a new police station, which is, really important for the people of the whole of Dudley. And unfortunately, Mr. Jameson didn't want to appear on the stage on the radio programme with three of us, just himself and Marco, and that's regrettable because the answers could have been given there and then. Part of the deal for buying that land from the council, West Midlands Police put in the most generous offer. It was accepted, but also what made the offer irresistible to us was that they put forward quite a hefty sum for checking the ground conditions, and part of the delay in getting the new station built is the condition of some of that area. There's questions over where border walls, the condition of them, the condition of drains which run through several parts of the old industrial estate. But that's what the £1.2 million for groundworks is supposed to cover. So I would undoubtedly say that delays with West Midlands Police, but we are happy as a council to try and work with them. And I'm sure if Jason is successful in May, then I'm sure that real progress can be made on this issue for Dudley and many others pertaining to West Midlands Police.
And Andy, I'm sure you would want to lend support to that. And I think some of the blockages are typically bureaucratic. And for example, a retaining wall might need some work on it, and there's a dispute between who may be the owner of the boundary wall and all of that sort of nonsense. And that could literally hold up what a very important piece of strategic development that fits in very well with the regeneration of Dudley.
Yeah, so let me just broaden it first, because I don't know all the details of the retaining wall like you and Pat do. Let's see the mega picture here. The mega picture is we've had Labour Police and Crime Commissioners all the way through. And I think this number is right. They have closed or plan to close 44 police stations across the West Midlands. I mean, it is an eye-watering number. And we have got to stop that and reverse it. And of course, where we need to reopen a station, if we can, even if it's just a small front desk facility, Stourbridge would be an obvious place for considering that elsewhere in the borough, then that is what we should be doing, because I'm a huge believer that good policing starts in the community. And very clearly, I hope I'm allowed to say this, a vote for Jay Singh Sohal as the Police and Crime Commissioner will arrest the current Police and Crime Commissioner's plans. And obviously with a Conservative team, I think in other subjects, we've already demonstrated the ability to do the deals and get things going and restarted. And I'm sure the question of the police station in Dudley would be close to the top of Jay's list of things to be achieved.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for that, Pat, as well. And thank you for coming onto the radio the other day. I think people needed to hear what you said. The next question relates to something that's been an ongoing problem in Dudley, Andy, which I'm sure you will be aware of. So the way the question has been worded in front of me is, can you show us a business plan viability study for the university centre which proves without a doubt that it would be more profitable for the town plan than an entertainment venue? So we're talking about the Hippodrome, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Now, Andy, just to be very clear, and Patrick, you probably both know, you've seen me say very openly that this is a very difficult and an emotive thing for Dudley people, and I completely understand why, because part of me likes old buildings and heritage, and part of me actually thinks that somewhere in Dudley, for a town as large as Dudley, there should be a theatre of sorts, because we do punch above our weight as a country with the creative arts. And I think Dudley shouldn't miss out on an opportunity, particularly when we're talking about large regeneration plans. So the way this specific question has been worded is basically, I suppose, trying to ask, well, you're saying that a university plan is likely to be more successful than one for an entertainment venue. Can you comment on this, Andy? Basically, is the question.
Yeah. In general, yes. And I will, of course, also ask Pat to comment for a reason that I will explain in just a second. Because this proposal, of course, is all part of the town's application. And the business cases will be being done in great detail to answer the question that's come up. And I have not yet seen those myself, but I do know they'll be being done extremely thoroughly. And Pat will, I'm sure, comment on that. But I would make a general point here, and I know this is a difficult, emotive subject as someone's just flashed over the screen, but the idea of having a university facility in the town is absolutely to be welcomed. If you think of things that make great cities around the country, a university tends to be part of them. And I think it is absolutely right that Dudley has the ambition to bring that to it. Obviously, already Wolverhampton University gives some brilliant service to residents of Dudley, but to actually have its own capability alongside the Institute of Technology, alongside a brilliant college, actually one of the best in the country, will really begin to cement this idea of opportunities for citizens. So actually, if we could achieve that, I genuinely think it would be a breakthrough for a town, and many would frankly give their hind legs for that sort of opportunity. So I am very, and there we go. I am very supportive of the idea of a university because it really does give breakthroughs in economic thinking as well.
Okay, so I'm seeing comments coming up that obviously there's a lot of people who care a lot about the Hippodrome. And I have to say to both you and Andy and Patrick that I do completely understand where a lot of these people do come from. So would you accept, Andy, that in principle, one of our short to medium term projects has to be that we also look at venues where creative arts can be further developed in Dudley, even if it perhaps means that that venue is not the Hippodrome?
Categorically, yes. I mean, if you know, on my line of thinking of what makes a brilliant town, real quality for residents, and actually keep spending in the town as well. I don't actually step back on anything I've said about a university. I stand by what I said, but I would also agree the right performing venues are also part of that. And I know that elsewhere in the thinking about the town, there is thought about what we might be able to do for some form. So there we go. So definitely yes, Marco, is the answer to your question.
Thank you. Patrick, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, absolutely support trying to invest in having the right long-term plans for a nighttime economy and somewhere where the arts can flourish. Unfortunately, I'm a bit bemused by all the talk and chat about where is the business plan for a university campus. I've sat through many a meeting where we have literally been begging people to come forward with a business plan to revise the Hippodrome. And it just hasn't happened, and they've been given ample opportunity time and time again. Now, this issue was settled, I think, probably about 5 years ago now at the scrutiny committee, where we had members from 3 political parties that agreed that we had reached the end of the line and we would find an alternative use for that site. And I'm not prepared to revisit it anymore. I have had meetings with various people over the years, and not once has a viable plan come forward. But there is another angle to this, Marco and Andy. We only have to look at our neighbours in Wolverhampton, who started off with a budget of £20 million to refurbish an old building, and that cost has escalated to 20, 30, 40, in excess of £50 million. I'm not prepared to waste that type of expenditure on a building that hasn't been used for a theatre since the 1960s. And we have to deal with reality, and the reality is a university campus will bring in hundreds of students. A lot of those students will be Dudley born kids, and whereas in years gone by kids have graduated and left this borough, I want them to graduate and come back to highly paid jobs within this borough, and the university campus helps us try and achieve that.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And I think that question probably will be one of those that if somebody has submitted, many more additional substantive questions in relation to the Hippodrome, then we will have to commit to perhaps coming back to them in writing, as I stated at the beginning. But I want everybody hearing to know that, you know, I want to see a creative arts, a theatre in Dudley, even if that means it's not the Hippodrome, and it's obviously something for the future, but hopefully not the too distant future. We've got a question now from Lorraine Northway for Andy. Would you like to ask it, Pat, or shall I carry on?
I missed that, Marco. Could you repeat that? Sorry.
We have a question from Lorraine Northway. Shall I ask it, or would you like to ask it?
I'm trying to find it. If you can find it before me.
Okay, it's the one below the...
Oh, yes, got it.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah, came in quite early. Yeah, Andy, quite a personal one and a nice one to ask, because we don't often see this side of politicians. So it's Lorraine Northway, and it goes like this, Andy. We all have bad days when we fold our arms and say, I don't want to do this anymore with regards to our jobs. So how do you motivate yourself, Andy, when you have moments like this? And in those moments, how do you keep yourself focused and dedicated to your role as mayor?
It's a great question.
I probably should have said to people on the line that I haven't seen these questions before, as is now obvious. So this one's certainly taken me by surprise, but the spontaneity is fun. Okay, I think the answer might be a good glass of white wine, actually. So I will tell everyone this. It is my weakness. So when we went to lockdown, I thought, oh, I need to go and treat myself. So I live in the middle of Birmingham, and there's a marvelous wine merchant called Longhi, and I have stocked up on some little treats. So if I have a bad day, I certainly turn to some of those. But that's not that is true, that answer. But I don't know if it's the thing. I guess. I'll also tell you this in the spirit of honesty, because, you know, I spent 30 years in business, not in politics. And in business, you don't go on the television and find that 50% of the people send you disagreeing emails afterwards, and the 50% of the people are trying to make you fail. So I do find this whole world of that adversarial politics quite personally challenging, I will admit. But all you can do, Lorraine, is just look for your inner confidence and think, I might not get everything right, but I know what I want to do, and I'm following that sort of North Star of this as to why I gave up business and came to do this. And you've just got to dig deep to have that inner self-confidence, I'm afraid. That's and there are moments in the last 4 years when things perhaps haven't gone the way I wanted them to, that you have to dig pretty deep, but it must ultimately come from your own sense of purpose, dedication, and certainty, actually.
It's a great question, and obviously it's a very personal answer as well. So thanks for that, Lorraine. It did make me smile, because I have to say we all inevitably, all of us go through those moments, don't we? So the next question is from Susan Lowe, and I think I shall ask it. You say, Andy, that the Metro will bring visitors and tourism to Dudley and will revive Dudley's nighttime economy. Can you tell us how you intend to revive the nighttime economy in Dudley? And I guess the question is perhaps a joint one to Patrick in some respects as well, isn't it? Yeah. So this is just to be clear on tourists, first of all. I mean, you have some brilliant tourist attractions, obviously the castle, the zoo, and the Black Country Living Museum, all right there next to one another. But the difficulty is getting people to them. And so actually the Metro stop right there in front of it has got to be brilliant. So I don't think that is questionable, but it was one of the things that drove the business case actually for the Metro, the belief that we could bring many more people into Dudley in that way. And of course, if they come, they will spend in the adjacent areas. Now, nighttime economy is slightly different. The critical question is, of course, around how we're going to support hospitality. And I do think actually the government have done a very good job in terms of the grants, then the business rates, the VAT exemptions. So that's all coming. I hope, by the way, that they'll be extended longer, and that the whole sort of
period for paying back loans will be extended longer, and banks will be really very generous in thinking about those repayment pieces. But what we can also do, and this is where I might pass the baton to Patrick a bit, there are some really beautiful, cherished places in the middle of Dudley where I think we could do more, all working together to create a lovely, safe, a vibrant nighttime feel, actually. And I know the council have got some early plans for doing that. So I hope we'll bring the, let's say, provide the infrastructure for getting people in, of course, do the lobbying of government to make sure businesses are supported. But then there are some local planning issues as well that I think could actually create some beautiful spaces as well. And Pat and I were only talking about this a couple of weeks ago, so I will defer to him on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to touch on that, it's important we have that nighttime economy. However, we have to really lay the foundations to make sure that it's sustainable. The Portersville development is part of that, bringing more people into living in the town centre. The metro and the interchange will have all that connectivity so that we can bring people that want to live in the town but may not work in the town, so have that connectivity. We've also got plans around Stone Street where we have the old Dudley Museum. The previous administration wanted that closed and for it to become a training centre for Dudley MBC staff. I see that as a nice wine bar, gin bar, cocktail bar, whatever floats your fancy, for people to have a reason to come and visit the town centre on an evening. Opposite that, you have the equality and diversity offices where we can rehouse these guys. Then that could be say for instance, one of these craft beer type bars that are all the rage at the moment. And either side, you have the Saracen's Head, you have the Glass House restaurant, which is a nice restaurant. And in the middle, you've got Stone Street Square, where we have a very good events team at the council, and we should be encouraging them to put on events there on a regular basis. That then creates an avenue effect going right way up Stone Street towards the Griffin Pub and other establishments, where hopefully we can turn that area into a real hotbed of hospitality and nighttime economy. And that's our plan. But the first measure is to try and get more people living in the town centre. That creates the footfall. The footfall then gets the attention of would-be investors who can put private money as well as taxpayers' money into trying to revitalise some of these schemes and get that nighttime economy, not just bubbling along, but really thriving.
Great, thank you for that, Pat. And because you've obviously been focusing on that answer, it's given me the opportunity just to look at the list of questions. Shall we carry on that I carry on asking them? It's probably better, isn't it? Okay, so there's a question from Stephen Bennett. And Pat, this is perhaps more for you, but Andy, do feel free to come in. In regards to the metro, where will the new tracks be laid for the metro, and how will it connect Dudley Town Centre with local estates?
Trying to unmute, problems with new technology. The new tracks, we've already done the utility work. That a lot of that was done during the first lockdown. We're now in the process of trying to get tracks down. The tracks will run up Castle Hill, and the important part of I forgot the gentleman's name.
Stephen Bennett. The
important part of Stephen's question is how will it connect the estates? It'll run through Dudley, along more or less along King Street and down on the old railway line towards Netherton and the big island, Cinderbank Island. It'll then resurface roundabout at Woodside Stroke, Merry Hill waterfront. Our vision and the reason why VLR is so important is very light rail is a really very cheap way of getting trams and train transport out to the masses. It's a fraction of the cost of metro, and the technology we will be designing those new trams and trains of the future here in Dudley. It's not just a UK first for the borough, it's a world first for Dudley. So we should really bang the drum about this new technology. The test track will test the trams and trains, but the VLR Innovation Centre, that's where, you know, students and the graduates of tomorrow will be designing those trains and trams of tomorrow. Now, I hope for instance, that if the metro runs from Dudley through to Brierley Hill, there will be in the future a very light rail system that connects you from, say, Harts Hill down to, say, Russell's Hall Hospital, and perhaps even further to Pensnet Trading Estate, one of the largest industrial estates in Europe. That's got to be our vision. That's then when you've got a really joined up and connected public transport system. So the metro is important, but VLR, I think, is the answer for the transport systems of tomorrow, and it's happening in our borough.
And Andy, you'll be aware of VLR as well, won't you? But this is, again, all about that opportunity, opening up of opportunities to people and connectivity that Stephen is looking to see from the answer in the question as well, isn't it?
Well, there's two things just to add quickly, because everything Pat said is right. There's two things to add quickly. Is we had a question about the interchange early on. The clue is in the title. So the metro is like the spine, comes to the interchange, then the local connectivity comes off that. And that, frankly, is why it needed to be rebuilt. And that, frankly, is why we've worked hard to put, I think it's £24 million of regional funding and other investment into Dudley for exactly the reason behind the question. And then BLR, similarly, it's been driven by the Dudley team. But again, the CA has been very keen to, combined authority that I lead has been very keen to support this, because we see the opportunity for Dudley residents for this new technology.
Great. Question for you, Andy, from Laura. As a young person, it feels impossible to get on the property ladder. What are you doing to make sure that I'll be able to buy a house in the future and that it would be affordable?
Great question. Okay, quite a lot actually, Laura. So very pleased to answer the question. The first thing about to answer this question, we've got to build more homes. So very simply, we all know if the housing supply is constrained, is short, prices will go up, and people like you will probably miss out. So just the total number of homes is the critical first move. It's not sufficient, but just let's explain that. We have actually doubled the number of homes being built in the West Midlands over the last 5 years. And we're on target now for a sort of run rate every year to get to our total number that we think we need over the next 15, 20 years. So doubled the total number. The second thing we've done is we've made sure that a much higher proportion of them are affordable homes, particularly attracted for young first-time buyers. And we set an absolute stipulation that none of the schemes that we help fund can have combined authority funding. And remember, I said earlier, we've got about £450 million for this now, without committing to 20% affordable. And anybody who's been involved with housing or in local councils knows that it's very tough to get to 20% affordable on every scheme, but we have done it. And so we definitely have got more affordable housing as a specific result of that. And then there's one other really interesting little nuance. Might sound technical, but it's very important. We've changed how we define affordable in the West Midlands. So the national definition relates affordable to the property prices. So if you live in a very expensive place, let's say you live in a smart part of Stourbridge, and property prices are very high, that you will then get something affordable that genuinely isn't. It's still out of reach of people on, let's call it, standard incomes. We've said the definition of affordable should be related to people's pay, not the value of those homes. And we're asking that the rent or the purchase price, depending on what you're doing, is no more than a third of that take-home income for people like newly qualified nurses, new police officers. So we're deliberately trying to make sure that new homes are built with that new definition of affordable, so it genuinely will be affordable. I'm guessing, Laura, for someone in your sort of situation. So we've tried to act decisively around exactly that.
Thank you, Andy. Next question, because I want to speed up a bit to try and get as many in as I can.
Sorry, we'll be trying to be quick.
No, that's we're a team here. A place that is close to my heart, Andy, that I visit every weekend now, doing some volunteering. So the Black Country Living Museum is at the heart of Dudley. I'm worried that it won't survive due to losses from the pandemic. What are you doing to help? So this is a question from Alan. You will, of course, be aware of a lot of government grants that are very successfully being bid for by the museum, Andy, but over to you.
Yes, so I think there's two answers to this. The first thing is, actually, I think we can be really optimistic for the Black Country Living Museum. because it is a unique place. And it has received very substantial funding from the government under what's called the Cultural Recovery Fund. And I suppose the most important thing I did was right at the beginning of the pandemic, was right on to the Secretary of State to say, you have got to put government cash on the table for that. It might now seem it's all done, all taken for granted, but actually right at the beginning, I was in there trying to do that. The other thing you'll be interested in about the Black Country Living Museum is, of course, they've won a lot of funding from heritage funds for their big expansion that they call Forging Ahead. And again, I was supporting them in that bid. But I'm going to actually connect this question with one earlier on. It does remain true, despite the success of the Black Country Living Museum, for whom I'm very optimistic, that there are not enough cultural assets in the Black Country. And when we had the Cultural Recovery Fund, we noted that in the Black Country, we got a lot less than, for example, in even Birmingham, let alone in London. And I have personally talked to the Arts Council about this, and they are up for looking at new opportunities in the Black Country that may become recipients of Arts Council funding in the future. And I raise this because obviously there was a lot of feeling, quite rightly, about the earlier debates around culture and the Hippodrome. So there is an acknowledgement from Arts Council England that more does need to be done. And so the door is open for innovative new ideas to come forward in your patch, Marco.
Great stuff, Andy. Thank you. We will keep plowing through the questions then. Nothing to do with the new MP in the area, of course, this, but Dudley has been underfunded for years. Why are we suddenly getting lots of investment? Question from Jake.
I'll answer the question because I think I can give full credit to the council here. Because obviously in this sitting in this chair, you see how different areas that get money or don't get money. And actually it's very straightforward. If the business proposal from the area is really good, it will eventually get funding. Might take a little time. There's some setbacks along the way. Pat hasn't had it all his own way, but ultimately we have found the funding by working together because of the quality of the proposal. And I can tell you the quality of proposals coming in from Dudley Metropolitan Borough Council, to give it its full title, is definitely first class at the moment. And that is what has changed. It's made it easy for us, for example, to support a number of the things that we've talked about.
Thank you, Andy. That was a question from Jake. So thank you, Jake. Next question is perhaps, I might divert this one off to Patrick first, Andy, and if you want to come in, Andy, do so. Pat, can you clarify what is happening with the Portersfield development? Is it housing, retail, or a medical centre?
Oh, over the years, Marco, I've often wondered myself, it's been, as Andy's just alluded to in his previous answer, you know, these projects start off with the best of intentions, and it is a real battle to get what you want, and sometimes you don't get exactly what you want, but it is an absolute battle, and it's a credit to the team that we've got at the council. Just going off track for a minute, they bid for Brierley Hill for the Towns Fund. Government officials said it was one of the best bids they had ever seen. That's how you get funding, by working together as a team. But the role of a Metro Mayor cannot be understated in this. Without Andy's involvement, we would be struggling to attract this funding. We need that figurehead. That was the whole idea of a combined authority. 7 Mets with one figurehead who has the ear of government, who we can send off to Westminster with our long lists of asks. But I'm glad to say some of our asks have been met, obviously because of Andy's involvement. To answer your question about Portersfield, at long last, obviously Cavendish has gone. We've now secured funding again from the combined authority for the groundworks to be and the roadworks to be undertaken. There is a report going to Cabinet at last, I believe in a couple of weeks' time, 2 weeks yesterday, I believe, about Portersfield, and it will for once state what is going on there. It will be a mixture of student accommodation, very important, that student pound, have people learning in the town centre, but also residing in the town centre. There'll be a mixture of apartments. Again, part of that phased approach to get more people living in the town centre, creating that footfall for future investors to come and invest in our high street. It will have a quite several thousand square feet of retail use, and it will also have a ice skating rink, a 38,000 square foot ice skating rink with a capacity for almost 2,000 spectators, which means that we can have teams there and competitions. That is the jewel in the crown of this development that hopefully not only will Dudley people use, but also people further afield. Again, bringing that much valued footfall into a town centre, again, which will later on attract, I hope, more investment. The original plans, Marco, were to have a supermarket. The bottom of that fell out with the then developer a long time ago. So those plans were abandoned by the developer themselves. There's been talk of a cinema there. We don't need another cinema in the town. We've got one within spitting distance at Castle Hill. We believe the mix on that development now is right: residential, retail, and more importantly, leisure.
Great, thanks for that. And Andy, if I could just perhaps develop a supplementary on that, as the MP that covers the whole of the Dudley town centre, I'm seeing so much investment and activity happening on the southern end, on the Castle Hill end, on Portersfield, with everything happening there. But the top end of the high street really does need some TLC. And if we're going to have a successful town centre, we need to be looking at regeneration plans to cover the whole of the town centre. So if you like, you want two magnets that draw people from one end of the town centre to the other, rather than clustered all at one end. What would be your thoughts around that, Andy?
Yeah, the need is absolutely right. And I would also say the two ends of it have got to be complementary, actually. So what you've got to do with a really successful town centre is think about the different components. So you have a wonderful market right in the heart of it. We've talked about the leisure activities. You've also, and we've talked about new residential, really important. But we have actually got to upgrade some of the retail along the main high street as well. And what's happening there is work's been done by my town centres group at the CA, the town's fund that the council are putting together for what is probably going to be called a master plan for the sort of investor plan for the town centre there. So I absolutely agree. And I believe that if we take that holistic approach, we will be able to drive in new investment. The lesson of the last 10 years is you can't do small incremental pieces. It doesn't work. We've seen in lots of towns that fall backwards. We need to think dramatically about what the reinvestment in that part of the town centre is.
Thank you, thank you. And actually that really does answer a question that Kevin McAllister had asked, which was around the town centre and what can we do to make it a vibrant town centre again. So that's been answered. So we have now a question from Rifakat Nadeem. It says, hi all, first of all I would like to say thank you, well done team, Andy, Marco, to put up such a good webinar, very informative. I have heard tonight some brilliant projects are in the pipeline and some are already shaping up Dudley Town. I just want to know, are there any funds or grants available for people who would like to start something online but don't have the right level of investment or guidance that they need?
Depends a bit what you mean. If you mean for you to be trained in skills to lead a business online, categorically yes. If you mean so, and please go on the WMCA's digital skills training site, and you just go on the website and put in digital skills. You'll get all that. There's also money for developing businesses that have already started but want to scale up, as we call it. This whole idea of growing businesses. So that's there. What we don't provide, being very, very straight with you, is a sort of grant to start a business. So if that's what you're looking for the question, just a pure sort of, there's some cash to start the business. No, we do not do that from the public purse.
Okay, question
Hope that's
from
clear. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Question from Luke Smith, because we've only got a few minutes left. There are extensive travel infrastructure projects that we've put forward, and we're making that happen in Dudley. But what specific industries do you have in mind for the region? I think this is a good question.
Okay. It's a very interesting question. Now, we've already talked about one or two new ones, the very light rail, new technology. That's a new industry. But let's be really clear. There's a very important industry that we've not talked about at all. and that's the automotive industry, and there's everything that supplies automotive, really important. And that industry, as we know, is being electrified. And one very big piece of work that we're doing is to make sure that we remain the center of the electrified automotive industry. And particularly that takes us to the whole battery technology piece, where we're looking at one of my big goals at the moment is to get the government funding for what we call a gigafactory, where batteries will be produced. Now, people say to me, that's not in Dudley. But my goodness, it is part of an industry, that whole sort of metal manufacturing that supplies the automotive industry. That will need automotive to be very strong. And that in turn, in time, will definitely need this battery production. So the whole of the metal industry for automotive is going to be influenced by this going forward.
Thank you, Andy. And it looks like we have time for just one more question. And I think it's a great question for you, Andy. What made you want to be Mayor of the West Midlands after running John Lewis? Question from Alex.
Okay. Well, it's really very simple. I'd been in business for 30 years. I perhaps immodestly thought I'd learnt one or two things, probably, hopefully I had. And at the same time, I'd watched my home region, because, I am a Brummie, if I'm allowed to say that, with lots of Black Country people on the line. A Brummie, my parents are Brummies, my grandparents are Brummies. It's deep in my roots. I had a market stall here 100 years ago.
We'll convert you, Andy. We'll convert you.
I think I've been well converted over the last 4 years. Don't you worry. But I'd watched the place relatively decline. And I just thought, I can help do something about this, actually. So I'm full of pride in the place, full of sort of the notion of its potential, its opportunity, and the wonderful question from Laura about housing for young people, so important. And I just thought maybe I can make a contribution to try to improve it. And I genuinely thought that up to the end of 2019, if you looked at all the how we were doing before the pandemic, we genuinely were doing far, far better. We've been knocked for 6 by the pandemic, back to the very first question or second question that I was asked, knocked for 6, and now we've got to rebuild. And I hope what there's evidence of tonight is the team in Dudley has got just the set of answers for that rebuilding.
Fantastic. And we have come now to the end of the hour that we had allowed for this. I don't know how many questions were asked, but I'm sure the team of moderators will let us know afterwards. Andy, can I thank you very much for doing this? I know Dudley people very much appreciate you and in fact Patrick for doing this. It's late into the evening. I'm sure we have plenty of other things to be thinking about and doing with our families and all the rest of it. And I'm sure we're all probably tired at the end of a long day. But I know from some of the comments I've seen rattle through that this was well received. So thank you both very, very much. And I hope it won't be too long before we do this again. There is just one final question that's just snuck in that I would really like to get in, because I know Patrick is very, very keen on this one, as am I, to make a change in quite an important part of the borough for various different reasons. What are your thoughts, Andy, on a PRU school on the Wren's Nest and Priory, because there are a lot of youngsters out of education and all of the local schools are having problems with challenging youths, and we can help them more when we are compared to what we are doing at the moment, but we need help to do so. So this is a question from Paul Goff, Andy, who I've been to see, and he runs the Priory Park Boxing Club.
Wow.
And it's fantastic what he does. So he engages with local children who have been excluded from school. And he has connections with a school in Wolverhampton. And inevitably, what happens is they get eventually to go back to school in Wolverhampton together with the activities that go on at the boxing club. And this is proving a very, very successful formula. And what we're looking to do is to develop that a school very much more locally to the boxing club, so we don't have to ship pupils to Wolverhampton. They can actually stay in Dudley from an estate that's unfortunately, historically, we've seen quite a lot of exclusions. What would be your thoughts? And would you like to visit sometime, Andy? And I know Patrick has already been supporting this project for the short time that we've been pushing it.
I'm going to connect to the last two questions and give you a clear commitment. I would love to come and visit before the election, because actually this whole question of young people who don't have the opportunities, and I think you said your name was Paul who answered the question. You are Paul, yeah. You're obviously doing a brilliant job with the most challenged set of youngsters. So I would love to come and see what you are doing, and hopefully we could make a commitment to support what you're doing. Because if you think of what I said earlier about what we've got to do better at and opportunities, here we are right at the front line of that. So yes, so
it's absolutely key, and isn't it, Patrick? And I actually brought it up in a P&Qs, which is even Boris has said that he would like to come and see this. So would you like to add anything to this, Patrick?
It's a brilliant idea, and one that I personally throw my weight behind to support, and I'm hopeful that we can do the necessary, and soon Paul can be helping even more kids across the borough than what he's already doing with his tremendous boxing club.
Fantastic. And on that note, we have gone slightly over time, just by 2 minutes. I wanted to get that last one in because it really is a fantastic one to achieve here in Dudley, and hopefully we can do another one of these not to the distant future. And I think it's been very successful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for hosting it. Thank you for hosting it as well, Marco. Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.